I was sitting in the friends and family section somehow, and I was so stressed out. My Xavier Watts' family and Jaden Greathouse's family and like the Clark family were next to me, and they were consoling me throughout the game because I was like had my head in between my knees in the first half. I was sick to my stomach watching.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Echoes, a Notre Dame podcast. If you're new here, which you all are, we appreciate you stopping by. I am Mike Golic Jr., joined as I will be every single week, and I think Tuesdays from now on is the day we are going to release, by Jessica Smetana. Jess, what's going on?
Mike, I am so excited to be recording our first ever episode of The Echoes. You can follow us on at The Echoes ND Pod on social media. We're going to post clips. We're going to maybe post some memes, Mike. I don't know. Maybe we're going to get a little crazy, but we're going to be on YouTube, wherever you find your podcast. So please tune in, like Mike said, every Tuesday to hear what we have to say about the Irish. But we want to start out by maybe introducing ourselves a little bit. Mike, you're a famous Notre Dame Nepo baby, one of the most famous, I would say. Um, but what do Irish fans not know about you that maybe they want to know?
Yeah, well, and if you're coming to us from a variety of different places, which we hope you are, we're part of a great network of podcasts here. And so if you came to us from one of those places or anywhere else, yes, to Jess's point, I'm Mike Golic Jr. I am a card carrying Notre Dame Nepo baby. I played football for Notre Dame from 2008 to 2012. My dad also was a captain back in the 80s. My uncle Bob won a national championship with the Irish back in the 1970s. My younger brother played on the team with me. My sister swam at Notre Dame. So we are deeply a part of the cult of the Irish, like everybody else. But I was a part of the 2012 Notre Dame team that went undefeated in the regular season. And we don't have to talk about what happened after that before getting into the broadcast media career here as well. As far as some things that Irish fans may not know about me, I mean, Jess, you and you teased this, I think, in one of the promo videos that we did, but I am a card carrying member of the Notre Dame North Dining Hall fan club. It is one I'm fiercely loyal to and had the chance to go back. I'll have some content coming out at some point of some dining hall foods that I got to try back on Notre Dame's campus at the newly
Oh,
renovated North Dining Hall. And may I just say, she is a beauty.
okay, what a tease. I need to see those videos. Mike, you also do snack reviews on your TikTok and Instagram, which I love, which is not affiliated with this podcast, but people I think will enjoy that. So you're a food expert. As far as my Notre Dame bona fides go, both of my parents went to Notre Dame. My sister went to Notre Dame. None of them played football at Notre Dame, though. They were all just, nerds, I guess. I also did not play football at Notre Dame, but I have been a Notre Dame fan my entire life. I've been to a jillion Notre Dame football games. I have a very um like an answer I've given a million times when people say what is your favorite Notre Dame game you've ever been to? And I have like a very consistent answer with that. I always say the 2006 UCLA Notre Dame game where Brady Quinn threw game-winning pass to Jeff Samardzija. I was in the stands. I think I was in like 5th grade or 6th grade, and it was like one of the most nerve-wracking football games of my life. However, Mike, I was thinking about it this weekend. I think that my answer may change now. When people ask me what my favorite Notre Dame game is that I've ever been to, I think I have to say the Indiana Notre Dame home playoff game from the 2024 season. And when we talk about expectations for next season, I think that one of the reasons why my Notre Dame vibe level is so high right now is because I had the opportunity to go to all the playoff games last year, and they were so much fun and so amazing, and really just tickled me as a younger-ish Notre Dame fan who, through my childhood, not a lot of successful postseasons, I would say. I mean, you mentioned 2012. I also was at the Cotton Bowl playoff game that Notre Dame got blown
Yeah.
out of by Clemson. We've seen some rough things in the postseason, and that all changed last year. So right now, my expectations are about as high as they get for Notre Dame football. But that comes after of years and years of some trauma, if I'm being honest.
Well, and that's what this podcast is hopefully going to be about, right? Is equal parts. We want to get everyone updated on what's going on in Notre Dame in all facets, right? The recruiting that we've seen all summer. We'll be reacting to games and previewing during the season. We'll be talking about the other great sports teams on campus, women's basketball, men's lacrosse, the dining hall debates that we mentioned here. So, all of those things are certainly going to be a part of what you can expect here on this podcast. As far as today, we will take a look at the upcoming season right now, some of the injuries that have affected the way that might look at the beginning over the course of the summer. We'll take a look at the quarterback competition coming up today and a look at some of my fellow future Nepo babies on the Notre Dame team as a part of an incredible recruiting effort right now, and maybe a bold prediction or two as we go along here. But this is also going to be a place for us to trauma dump with you guys. Jess and I have shared the same very deranged fan brain for a long time now. We've always enjoyed commiserating about it, and we hope to do that with you. So again, at the Echoes ND Pod, wherever you can follow us on social media. We want to hear about your favorite games, your worst traumas as a Notre Dame fan, and everything in between as we kind of go along with this. But you mentioned the expectations for this year, Jess, and let's get into some of that to start things off. It was a very different kind of season for Notre Dame fans last year. One of those ones that we had gotten somewhat rarely over the last couple of decades. To your point in my lifetime, even when I first got to Notre Dame as a player, we were a 500-ish football team when I came in under Charlie Weiss, when he was fired and Brian Kelly took over, until that 2012 season where we kind of tapped back into what Brady and them had gotten for a little bit of the Weiss years at the beginning and so on. And so now I guess, Jess, how much did last year 3 for Marcus Freeman at the helm as a head coach, which we know is a big year in lore for a lot of coaches, especially Notre Dame coaches, as kind of a put up or shut up year? How much did last year and that run you talked about in the playoff change your perspective on where this program can go now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really offered a proof of concept for Marcus Freeman, and I think you're seeing that bear out a lot in some of the like, the role that Notre Dame's been on in recruiting especially. It's hard to recruit against, Penn State and Georgia if you always lose to Georgia or if you lose to other top teams in the big conferences. So I think that, like, it's not just me and my warm and fuzzy feelings and vibes. Like, this is something that I think a lot of people saw and are starting to maybe buy into even more now. Like, Marcus Freeman always has been someone that we wanted to believe in, right? When he was hired to be the head coach, it was like a younger, fresh face, someone who's like really energetic, who really gets Notre Dame. And now it's like, and he can win 14 games in a season. Like, that's something that happened, and beating some really good teams along the way. That being said, obviously, the national championship game did not end as we wanted. So the season did end on sort of a sour note, but I still really am excited about this season because Jeremiah Love's coming back. A lot of the offensive line will be back. I mean, that was such a huge thing going into 2024 was this offensive line has so little experience, even though, they're high caliber recruits. They've just never played together before. They haven't played a lot of snaps. They haven't started any games together. There's a lot of position groups coming back. I mean, what Marcus Freeman has done with the secondary is something that, as Notre Dame fans, we're not really used to that being a focal point on the defense in the last few years with Xavier Watts, All American, Benjamin Morrison, Leonard Moore, who is coming back this season. It's just been, I mean, obviously Kyle Hamilton, who was around, a couple seasons ago with Marcus Freeman. It's been different, and I think it's really exciting that if you look from position group to position group, from what Notre Dame finished the season with last year to coming into 2025, a lot of the same faces are back and with that experience under their belt. That being said, obviously the big question mark, Mike, Riley Leonard's gone. Who is going to be the quarterback? We will get to that a little bit later, but I think the ceiling sort of depends on if you have a quarterback that can win those games. Notre Dame could win 12 games. They could win the whole regular season. They're going to be favored in a lot of their games this season. So yeah, expectations are high, but I think they're where they should be given what we saw last year.
Yeah, proof of concept is a great way to put it because I remember when this was about, what could be the potential that was out there. I covered Marcus and really Mike Denbrock when they were both at Cincinnati with Luke Fickle back in like 2017, I think. And I remember walking out of the coaches' meetings. When you're part of the broadcast crew, you get, for anyone that doesn't know, you get time to meet with the coaching staffs from both team. And we got to meet, it was at Cincinnati, with that staff in person. And we all walked out of the meeting with Marcus Freeman and said, that guy's going to be a head coach at some point. Like he just had that natural air of someone who was built to lead a program. And we obviously saw it at Notre Dame, the player reactions when he took over, all that stuff. But it was the growing pains of the first few seasons of watching someone in one of the biggest stages in sports learn how to be a head coach and learn who he was in that chair. And last season felt like, all right, the game slowed down for Marcus Freeman. We talked as a fan base ad nauseum about the fourth down decision making, some of the aggressive coaching decisions in games like the Georgia game, where we saw Marcus stare eye to eye with some of the best coaches and most well known coaches in the sport and go toe to toe, if not outdo them in certain instances. So I think that does give me a lot of hope, Jess, as does the fact that you talked about last season, the lack of experience going into the year, 6 combined starts for the offensive line, a bunch of fresh faces on a defense that suffered injury after injury, as did that offensive line. Like, we got a lot of young dudes ready to go last year in a way that now all of a sudden you get to come collect on that. You get to come get the payoff of that, provided obviously health stays stock this year. So we look at this season, Notre Dame last year, again, finished with 11 regular season wins. The sports book this year right now has win totals at 10.5 for Notre Dame. So, Jess, do you think that's in the right spot? I mean, obviously, the big test is going to be right out of the gate for Notre Dame again this year. And certainly quarterback is going to go a long way in dictating that. But opening the season at Miami and then back home for the rematch against Texas A&M from last season, that seems to be, I think, where, and I'm sure a lot of people like they did last year are going to decide one way or another about how they think that season's going to go.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that has changed over the last season, Mike, which I feel like we need to constantly remind ourselves is that the formula before 2024 was you have to win 12 games to get in if you're Notre Dame. I mean, there was a chance
Yeah.
Notre Dame could make the playoff in 2021, 11-1 with the loss to Cincinnati. But like winning all those games is the way that you can punch your ticket if you're a team that's not in a conference. So now it's changed. You can lose a game. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois last year and still hosted a game. So there is a little bit of a tiny, tiny margin of error now that maybe wasn't there before with the 14 playoff.
Well,
Obviously, you still want
and
to win all of your games.
sure, but now we also have the, to your point about how the structure of the sport has kind of helped Notre Dame out. I mean, this was a headline from so long ago this offseason that you almost forget it. But now that they've gone to natural seeding too for this upcoming season, like we won't have a change in the playoff structure overall. It's still going to be 12 this year, and they haven't decided beyond that. But now going to, no, we're just going to rank the top 4 who are going to receive that first round bye based on the end of season rankings from the committee instead of those being the 4 highest ranked conference champions like it was last year that produced some wonky results. So now it does open it up for Notre Dame could be one of the top 4 seeds. Notre Dame could receive that first round bye in a way that I know it didn't show up as an advantage last year, but Jess, I think that was a lot more who was seated where because of
Yeah.
those rules than it was, oh, there's something to be said about teams getting cold with that extra week of recovery in between.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, the home playoff game was amazing, but I would have rather had Riley Mills later in the season who got
Right.
injured in that game. Like injury is always going to
Great
be a thing
point.
in the playoffs.
Great
So
point.
absolutely, and I think that maybe there's a tiny bit of a margin for error now. Like if you lose to Miami in week 1 or Texas A&M in week 3, which are going to be, I think, the 2 toughest games just from a pure talent perspective of this upcoming season, you still have your eye on the playoff and hope that things kind of shake out in your favor. Whereas losing both of those games, that's not a really great way to start the season. So obviously win all your games and none of that playoff stuff
Yeah.
matters. And we will promise we will not be the podcast that just talks about the playoffs constantly as a lot of college football podcasts do.
But it's July, so
But it's
please offer us
July.
some grace.
It's July and 10.5 seems like a really good you know, that's Vegas knows what they're doing with that line. Notre Dame's playing 2 teams that in the very front of the season, Miami and Texas A&M, that are going to be the 2 toughest teams in terms of S&P Plus, which is Bill Connolly's ranking that I his metric that I use a lot in college football. They are both like 90th percentile teams in college football, and then afterwards you've got 2 really bad teams Notre Dame is going to play, Purdue and Stanford. Luckily, you get Purdue right after Texas A&M. Sorry to our
Yep.
producer Matt, who is a Purdue fan. Um, then in the middle of the schedule, Mike, it's just a lot of like really solid college football teams. And luckily, a lot of them are at home: Boise State, NC State, USC, that
Yeah.
stretch of 3 games in a row. But like even a road game in November against Pitt, Pitt was a weird team last year. and obviously sort of a pseudo rival of Notre Dame, but like you don't want to lose to Narduzzi and blow your playoff chances. So of course,
Let me tell you, as someone that was almost on the receiving end of the Pitt super weapon blowing up their season in the middle
2012.
of 2012, sitting on the sideline, I remember looking over at my teammate and line mate Braxton Cave, and we're down like 3 touchdowns in the first half, thinking, are we really going to lose to this Pitt team right now? And thankfully, an uncalled penalty with 2 players wearing the same number on a field goal block team later, we managed to survive that. But you're right, Pitt has always been that easy trap game team. So even with that, and what you talked about before the show, is a very weird and long November for
Yeah,
Notre Dame,
5
where they've got
games.
5 games, is insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, stop me if you've heard this before. It's a tricky schedule. They all are. College football schedules are always tricky. There's always some team that's going to pop out of nowhere, and occasionally it's a MAC team. And then they just beat you at home, and you are depressed for the rest of the entire month of September until things turn around. But yes, Mike.
Well, no, I think that's a good point though in looking at this schedule, because while Notre Dame does take some heat nationally for people that are too lazy to notice that they actually do always schedule pretty tough. I saw T-Bob Abear the other day. Shout out to T-Bob for putting some respect on the Notre Dame schedule for this season. But for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame now coming off of last season, especially at the end, where Notre Dame during our lifetime had always had the big game problem, right? Even going back to when I was there with Brian Kelly and then through his tenure, Notre Dame got to the point where they were winning all the games they were supposed to on their schedule. And it was about breaking through that upper crust. Last year's playoff run did a lot for in terms of the mental and emotional capital for the Notre Dame players going forward, because that stuff matters. Like going out there and actually seeing that proof of concept, all of what Marcus has been selling them, take through on the field, so that when you get in the fourth quarter, like I remember being in the fourth quarter of plenty of games when we were losing and a bad thing would happen. And that feeling of here we go again would be pervasive on the
And
sideline.
the fans know that feeling so well, Mike.
Yes. It is a deep, dark, terrible feeling that they did a lot of good in undoing last year and beating Indiana, Georgia, Penn State, and that great run here. Now this season, and I think the big test for a lot of people is, how does Notre Dame handle the other parts of that? How does Notre Dame handle the teams like Northern Illinois and Marshall that have snake bitten them in the past when they've been coming down off the high of a Texas A&M win to start last season? So that Purdue game going to be a huge test. Like Arkansas on the road, an
Yeah.
SEC team like that with a quarterback in Talon Green who is an absolute monster. Those are all going to be good tests for the maturity of a team that is now entering, and I should say re-entering, that, hey, you're a perennial playoff contender now. That is the expectation here
Yes.
based on the quality and the depth of the roster and who your coach is at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point too, like that team last year exercised a lot of Notre Dame fans' demons, winning in South Florida for one. I mean, after 2017 and 2012, it was like, is Notre Dame ever going to win one of these stupid Hard Rock Stadium games? And they did that in the Orange Bowl, one of the most stressful games I've ever watched in my life. I was sitting in the friends and family section somehow, and I was so stressed out. Mike, Xavier Watts' family and Jaden Greathouse's family and like the Clark family were next to me, and they were consoling me throughout the game because I was like, had my head in between my knees in the first half. I was sick to my stomach watching that game. It was so stressful. But and also, winning the road home or the road opener, Texas A&M game. Like that was a demon that Notre Dame, sometimes those games slip by you. And so last season was hugely important just from the mental side, like you said, but also for us fans and some of our demons that we had to exercise. So I think, like I said, starting the season in Hard Rock Stadium, no matter who the starting quarterback is, it's going to be their first start. And the rest of the team will have, just played there a few months earlier. So that's at least nice. It'll be a familiar place. And also, Mike, the national championship game is at Hard Rock Stadium this year. So hopefully it won't be Notre Dame's only game there. However, Miami's a weird team. They're gonna have Carson Beck starting. He just came off of elbow surgery. They have a new defensive coordinator. Notre Dame also has a new defensive coordinator. That will be an interesting test for Chris Ash, who has not been a defensive coordinator in a while, since I think 2014 with Ohio State. So, very interesting way to start the season. And of course, Mike, because sometimes we just can't have nice things. Charles Jagusah, we found out last week, injured his humerus bone in a UTV accident in Wyoming. He was slated to start on the offensive line. And I frankly find nothing humorous about any of that.
God, you had to do it. It was right there. I appreciate you taking that bullet for us and stepping on that one. And you're right, Jess. That was a huge bit of off-season news. So I want to take a quick break, and coming up next, talk about how that impacts the start of the season, how that impacts the way we look at the win total, and probably the one that's going to influence both of those a little bit more. What we think happens for QB1 this year for Notre Dame now that they've decided to stay in-house. That'll be right after the break here on the Echoes. All right, welcome back to the Echoes. Again, check us out. Follow us at the Echoes ND Pod on all social media. Download, subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcast, and check us out on our YouTube channel as well, so you can see us in addition to hearing us on this podcast every Tuesday from now until we don't know, hopefully a good long time, as we get to hang out with Notre Dame fans and talk about a lot of good news like we had last season. But Jess, unfortunately, the bad news you mentioned in the last block there for Notre Dame this summer over 4th of July weekend, Notre Dame star offensive lineman Charles Jagusah underwent surgery to repair that fractured humerus that he injured in a UTV accident in Wyoming. The same Charles Jagusah that missed 2024, starting the season with a pectoral injury, before ultimately being able to come back and play spells as a right guard in the game against Penn State, before ultimately starting the national championship against Ohio State because of injury, and just playing insanely well in both. Charles was a guy that so many people were excited about going into last season, and you saw why. That is a player, and I went back and watched a ton of both of those starts just to kind of get the little window into that guy that we could. That is first round ability, probably top 15 NFL draft pick type of ability, and a guy who largely went out there and backed it up on the field and played insanely well given the circumstances, playing two positions against two of the best defensive lines that Notre Dame saw all season in adverse circumstances. So just take me back to July 4th weekend. Notre Dame's in the middle of a recruiting heater, and you get this news. What was going through your mind?
Man, such a bummer. I mean, like you said, he missed all of last season, ended up coming in so clutch in those last few games. It seems like he may be back at the tail end of this season. It's still sort of unclear what the timeline is, but there was the word favorable was thrown around, so I'm like, okay, maybe that's you don't want unfavorable prognosis. So favorable is better than that, whatever that means. And the seasons, if Notre Dame is in the playoffs, which hopefully they are, the season's very long now, so maybe he will be back and make an impact. But I think overall, just it's such a bummer, and I feel bad for the guy because he didn't want this to happen. A lot of fans will come down hard on a player that makes a mistake like this and say that it's selfish and you're an idiot or whatever. But I can assure you, I don't know Charles Jagusah personally, but he probably is more upset than any combination of fans could ever be, because this is just a really terrible way to go into a season. So I feel bad for him. I'm going to give him a little bit of grace on that, but it is really just a huge bummer. I think on the flip side, the fortunate thing is that we saw last year Notre Dame does have depth. They do
Yes.
have Joe Rudolph did a really good job with that offensive line. I mean, you could speak to some of the things you saw last year with you know, high caliber offensive line recruit versus coaching, like what you saw going through the season, what made the biggest impact, to have, all of those starters go down with injuries and still make a national championship game. There's got to be some combination of both going on, I would think. But what do you think will be the ultimate outcome of this? Who do you think is going to start there? What's the offensive line? Can you kind of predict what the order is going to be? Obviously, it's hard to tell. It's only July, but what do you think?
Yeah, so well, first off, the point you made about last year in coaching, I think is a really good one. Like, I never played for Joe Rudolph. I played for Harry Hiestand my last year. The year we went to the national championship, we had no injuries along the offensive line. Like, we had what a rare thing in sports, and usually one that's pretty predictive of success for a lot of teams when you've got continuity at that position group in particular, one where just by nature of having to have five guys continually on the same page in order to go and execute, means that having the same guy is able to communicate and see all that through the same set of eyes, was always the way we phrased it, is paramount. And so we had no injuries that year until Zach got, Zach Martin, who is our left tackle on that line, had an ankle injury against USC, but we had the 40 days before the BCS game. So he had plenty of time to just get healthy and get right for that. Last year, you talk about all the injuries for Notre Dame on the offensive line. Before the season, you get that with Charles. Ashton Craig, their center, goes down early in the season, so Pat Coogan takes over there. And that does, in my mind, Jess, when you have that many guys that go out and play, guys that start the season comparatively inexperienced with only 6 career starts, and then by the end of the year are like a Joe Moore Award semifinalist for the best offensive line in college football. That to me was coaching. You saw those guys go out there and consistently execute similar technique across the board, no matter who was in that lineup, communicate through situations really well, handle movement and blitzes, and all these things that to me are indicative of an offensive line that, especially from the neck up, knows and understands what's being asked of them and the challenge that's in front of them. So, again, I never played for Joe Rudolph. I don't know exactly what he coaches, but I feel like I do based on watching that. And to me, that's a real feather in his cap for someone who came well regarded, obviously a ton of awesome years at Wisconsin. And so now as you look at that group, they are fortunate to have some guys coming back with that experience. Ashton coming back at center this year, healthy. Emil Wagner, who was, I thought, really underrated season, incredibly consistent for them at right tackle. And then Billy Schrouth at left guard, who's probably the most talented of the group, sans Charles Jagusah, and Anthony Knapp, who came out of, really that training camp as the guy walking into the fire. And Jess, let me tell you, that young man went on to have a freshman All-American season, maxed out his ability. That Texas A&M game is going to be so fun for him to look back on as the years go by, because going up against Shamar Stewart, Nick Scorton, and those freaks of nature at Texas A&M, he looked like a freshman making his first start and got so much better as the year went on. So all that is to say, like, there's talk, like some people wondering if Will Black, who's a really talented freshman recruit this year, might get the opportunity to come in and play at left tackle early. Anthony Knapp's always a guy I thought could kick down to the inside and be pretty effective playing guard if they needed him to be, to get their best five on the field, especially if you were going to slot Charles there. But all that is to say, I get they lost guys this offseason to the transfer portal because of all that depth, right? Rocco Spindler at Nebraska, Pat Coogan to Indiana, Sam Pendleton to Tennessee. But I still think they've got enough guys they recruit well at that position to where I really trust any lineup they're going to put out there.
How much do you think Riley Leonard's, abilities as a really like elite short yardage, runner had to do with hiding some of the inexperience last year? Because I do think that is something that some fans may be concerned with. If CJ Carr is the starter or if Minchey is the starter, neither of them are going to have like the physical tools Riley Leonard had to just like be just run through run through the like he was so good at like one very specific thing that I don't think you could take for granted in the quarterback position, right, Mike? Like neither of those quarterbacks will probably be doing that. Although, Minchey can scoot. Like a little bit more mobile than CJ Carr is, I think. I obviously haven't, gotten really to see either of them play yet. But is that something that concerns you at all that, Leonard's not going to be there to help out on those specific down situations?
Definitely. And I mean, we saw Riley forget running through guys, running away from guys. The images of him on the perimeter of that Georgia defense in that game, running away from some of the best athletes in college football, is a reminder. He absolutely just helped smooth out some of those things in the early going. And having a quarterback that's a plus runner who can hold the backside of a defense will always be one of the best weapons for an offensive line. You see it right now across the NFL. Most of the top 5 rushing teams in the league are teams that have dual threat, like true dual threat quarterbacks. And so, yeah, I think that is something where the experience of this group plus Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and the experience of that running back group is going to kind of have the inverse effect now. They're going to have to be able to shoulder more of that load early while we do figure out who's going to be up under center here. And Jess, why don't we do that? We've got a true quarterback competition and an in-house one. Our thanks to Riley Leonard, the recently engaged Riley Leonard, who's getting ready for
Congrats.
Colts training camp. We're all rooting for him there for what he did. Him and Sam Hartman the last 2 years have been Notre Dame's quarterbacks by way of the transfer portal. They've been experienced players where we know what the expectation is or what the ability we think will look like based on seeing them play real college football games. Notre Dame now goes and stays in-house. It was a very big point of discussion this offseason for Marcus Freeman and company, who were pretty adamant every step of the way. They weren't going to take a transfer. They believed they had their quarterback on the roster. And so, Jess, how do you kind of go and handicap this situation as we head into fall training camp?
Yeah, I mean, just based off of like some of the conversations I've had, this is, just my opinion, obviously. It seems like CJ Carr had such a um high level recruitment. Like he's someone that I think the staff like really wants to be the start and wants to succeed. However, the fact that they haven't closed the door on Kenny Minchey tells me that it's a lot closer than people think. I don't think they're just like saying there's a quarterback competition for funsies, Mike. I mean, maybe you disagree, but I think, this Minchie was a top 15 quarterback recruit in his class. CJ Carr's obviously a top 10 guy. He was the number one guy out of Michigan. His grandfather's Lloyd Carr. We all know that now. He missed a lot of time last year with an elbow injury
Yeah.
and didn't throw for 6 weeks, I believe. So it doesn't seem like that is any sort of concern. But missed time throwing. It's just some more practice that Minchie probably had. Are
Well,
you
then
concerned
CJ
about that?
Well, no, then CJ uncorked those couple of beauties in the spring football game. And I got to
Yes.
tell you, for someone who, like, guys, we all hated spring football practice. It was the worst. Having to be out there for all that was awful. I never enjoyed spring football a single time I went through it. That being said, you're just trying as a player to go and flash and get more reps for fall camp. Like nothing's ever decided in spring football, but I'll be damned if I didn't throw all of what I know about spring practice out the window and its goals when I saw him uncork those couple of throws up the sideline and thought, we're back, baby. We're so back.
Oh, I'm the opposite. I'm like, I'm gonna pretend I didn't see that because I don't want it to cloud my judgment because this isn't a real football game. But yeah, I mean, style of play wise, do you feel like they differ at all? Like I said, like Minchie's maybe like a little more mobile, whereas Carr, to what I can tell from like high school reporting, he's not as mobile. But I don't think it's not like dual threat versus pocket passer type thing. It's more like Ian Book versus Jack Cohn type, maybe. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a bad comparison, but
Yeah.
because Cohn did not scoot.
I would just say shout out to Jack Cohn, who is many things, but mobile was certainly not one of them. No, Jess, I think it is interesting. Like from what we've seen again in some of the limited action for Kenny last year, like he is someone that can add some value, maybe less like in the downhill run QB power with him the way you could with Riley, and more like a read option, true RPO guy that can at least get on the edge and make a DN think for an extra second here. And I think what's really interesting is like you're right, based on everything we know about recruiting, overall ability, if CJ wins the job, that would be one of those things I'm sure Notre Dame fans would feel like it's best for the future. But Kenny's been around. I think both of them now, it's interesting. We on the outside the last couple of years felt like we had a really good understanding of the situation going in, even if coaching staff, like last year with Riley Leonard, they didn't get him all spring because of the injury suffered, ironically, against Notre Dame versus Duke the year
Howard
prior.
Cross.
The Howard Cross tackle that will live in infamy for a million reasons. But Mike Denbrock and the receivers didn't get to work with them all spring. They didn't get to really have their first crack until fall camp. So we all felt like we knew what Riley Leonard was capable of, but practically for that team, they weren't able to figure that out until much later in a way that we saw that rust in the early part of the season, especially in the timing of the passing game, was noticeable. With these guys, we on the outside have very little idea, but on the inside, these guys have been in this offense now with Mike Denbrock for the last, off season plus going into this year. They've been around this program and know what Marcus Freeman expects of them. The rest of the players on this team know them. And so I do think that is an advantage for the team internally in a way that's still, going to need some growth once they get to actual games and things change for them.
Yeah, I think like in the sports cliche, the spirit of sports cliche, competition ultimately probably a good thing. Like I think
Yeah.
they both really want to win the job, so like I'm cool with it. I would be more surprised if Kenny Minchie started in week 1, and like again, that's basically based on vibes. But either way, like we said, it's going to be the first start for whoever it is. And I think Notre Dame's going to just have to rely a lot on the things that they are good at, which is, I think, a good place to be. And when you look at like preseason rankings and lists and all of those sorts of things, like Notre Dame is just in like a weird spot where they don't have a returning quarterback. So they're not going to get the same amount of hype as like Clemson's getting, right? With Cade Klubnik coming back,
Right.
or even Miami with Carson Beck. Like it's just not or Texas A&M with Marcel Reed, who, had a lot of struggles last year, but still put up some numbers and, is coming back. He's a returning starter. So there is just that question mark there for now. Um, One interesting tidbit, though, Steve Angeli, who was part of this three-way QB
Yeah.
competition, we will likely see him at Notre Dame when Syracuse comes in November for senior night. So
Hey,
all three guys will once again be in the conversation in a
and,
few short months.
That is former Notre Dame hero Steve
Yes,
Angeli, who will have my respect forever, leading that
except for
2-minute
those
drive
4
against Penn
quarters
State.
if he
Yes.
plays
Yes,
against Notre
exactly.
Dame.
For those 4 quarters, but an incredible player. And honestly, one that should, and I think was the takeaway for Irish fans, the fact that he felt compelled to make that decision. And I think Marcus and the staff feel like anecdotally they've been pretty good communicators with players in terms of the realistic opportunities here and treating everyone fairly in that regard based on, just the way you've seen it operate. And so the fact that he felt compelled to leave should be a solid sign that the two players, whoever comes out of this quarterback battle, are both guys that this team and staff trust to go and lead the team, in lieu of a guy in Steve who had at least started and played some meaningful games for Notre Dame over the course of his tenure as a really high valued backup that's now going to get a great opportunity with Fran Brown, who's been a ton of fun for college football. So I'm excited for those two guys there. Excited to see who comes out quarterback for the Irish. Coming up next, we will give you guys, after this break, our win total prediction for this year, maybe a bold prediction and a look at Notre Dame on an absolute recruiting tear right now. Next on the Echoes.
Well, Mike, speaking of Nepo babies, you mentioned a lot of Notre Dame NFL, tons of NFL players coming to Notre Dame. I saw that Marcus Freeman, he did have a quote about it. I don't know if you saw like the whole Marcus Freeman media blitz this past weekend in New York. There
Oh,
was
yeah.
Good Morning America, I think Today Show. Those are the same thing to me. I don't know what the difference is. I don't know which
Okay,
one he
thank
did.
you. I've never understood the difference between the two. I'm so glad
I'm
we're having the
sorry. This is
conversation.
sacrilegious to Regis Philbin, I feel like. Rest in peace. He was on the one with Michael Strahan, and then they did a bunch of other media stuff. I saw the players were playing in Central Park football with people. Oh man, it warmed my
Can I
heart.
say Notre Dame's done a really good job with like the media blitz. Obviously, Marcus Freeman does really well with that. But Notre Dame every year has kind of taken their players around to some site, whether it's been out here in California, in New York, and gotten these players a lot of good media exposure, a lot of good connections, like a lot of the good networking that can help these guys after their career in a way that actually serves that like 4 for 40 years mission that Notre
Yes.
Dame always touts. They've done a really good job of backing that up and providing these opportunities for guys.
Yeah, and also there's no, independent FBS media days. So Notre Dame's gotta produce their own July media. Like we're listening to all these quotes from Eli Drinkwitz and all these other SEC head coaches at their media days. So Marcus is like, let me put mine out there too. So I saw a quote from him that said that he basically about like all of the NFL sons that are are playing at Notre Dame or are actively being recruited or have committed to Notre Dame, which include Thomas Davis Jr. and Devin Fitzgerald recently. And he said that he thinks, quote, I think a lot of these guys that have played in college and played in the NFL understand the value of this university, not only its football program, but the network and people that you're in contact with every day here at a place like this. So are you buying into this, or do you think Notre Dame's just like, yeah, just bring us all the Suns. It's we want it for the gram. We're gonna take a photo with Jerome Bettis and Ike Taylor and their kids.
Listen, I certainly think, like you said, in creating your own media buzz, those photos certainly don't hurt. And Notre Dame understands the value of a legacy about as well as anybody. So there's certainly part of that. But I think there's truth to what Marcus said there. Like, I remember asking my dad about this the other day, as a former college and NFL player at Notre Dame who went through the process of recruiting process with 3 athletes and 2 of them that played football in his house. And you do just know a little bit more of what to look for. And this idea that at some point football is going to end, like for a lot of people out there who don't know, everyone thinks that their kid's going to go D1. Everyone thinks that their kid's going to play professionally in whatever sport they're tracking way too young at this early, and how those processes work across all sports, which is a story for another day. But the kids of former players and the former players that are their parents, I think just have a better idea of the reality of that situation, of how hard it is. And so I do think some of those other things from the periphery about the education, about the network it sets you up with, are things that they are a little bit more aware of. And hey, this is going to be more important than you realize right now. I can tell you that while you saw this happen for me, there's a million guys that I played in college or high school with who are at home doing something else that you need to be prepared for. And I think the other part of it is Marcus is also a former player. He's a guy that they trust. Peer age-wise, he's closer to being a peer of theirs. And so having someone like that who not only they feel like they can trust at every step, has, publicly backed up what he said with action, they also have seen a school where a lot of young players have been getting on the field early. Like Jess, as we get into now the fourth year of what will be the Marcus Freeman era, I think at this point, one of the things that I think he can really hang his hat on, and Leonard Moore was the latest to do it at a high level last year, but they get young players ready to go early and they let them get out there on the field. And in a day and age where you got options in the portal and guys can always leave, that proof of concept for young guys that want to get on the field now and either start making money in college or get themselves closer faster to making money in the NFL. I don't think that's a small thing in all these guys in a really competitive landscape to go along with just winning begets more winning on and off the field.
Yeah, and that's a change, right? Like, I would love to look at the number of freshman contributors in the last couple seasons versus maybe like the Brian Kelly era, because I remember that was the thing that, Notre Dame talked about for a long time. Is like it's really hard to get playing time as a freshman because the course load is so hard because you're getting adjusted to campus. Like they don't want to give put too much on a freshman player's plate. And like you said, like that doesn't seem like something that would work in this day and age. If you're a freshman and you're a highly recruited player and you're not getting playing time because like calculus
Yeah.
is too hard or whatever, you're going to transfer. So I don't know. I mean, this is just me totally speculating if that is something that has actually really changed or what is behind that. Or if it's just maybe our perception because we've had, Notre Dame's had like a high level freshman recruit in all of the last few classes that maybe they didn't have before. I'm just kind of maybe we could break that down in July here, because there's really not a whole else going on in college football other than recruiting news here and there. But anyways, yeah, that's
Yeah.
something I've been thinking about because, like you said, like Leonard Moore is a great example. Like he, came in and Benjamin Morrison too contributed from really like they had a lot on their plate football wise from day one.
They did. And I mean, you look across the board, like Adon Schuler is a redshirt sophomore. Drake Bowen's a true junior and did last year as a true sophomore. Jaden Osbury is a redshirt sophomore. Up and down this list, Kingston Viliamuasa, who, by the way, his mom on Twitter, one of Notre Dame's greatest assets, and as far as like a public ambassador to the program. So shout out to KVA's mom on Twitter. I need to get her name and give her the respect that she is owed for being a prolific tweeter. But all that is to say, like, and this will be the interesting challenge of Al Golden, the now Bengals defensive coordinator back in the NFL. Big loss for the Irish. What he did in that unit, conjunction with Marcus Freeman, was exemplary over the last couple of seasons as someone who really had that kind of career renaissance coming back with Notre Dame. And now for Chris Ash, who takes over, you've got the same position coaches at all three level, but are they going to be able to have that same ability to have packages for these young guys, get them on the field in spots to get them that meaningful
You know
experience?
what I just thought about? You know how like during the Alabama dynasty, Nick Saban became like the image rehabber for a bunch of fired guys like, Bill O'Brien and Lane Kiffin and like Sark and like all these like offensive gurus that then went on and like had great opportunities after leaving Alabama. Maybe Notre Dame can be that, but for defensive people. Like Al Golden, not an amazing reputation in college football, coming back to college football last year. Like he was a linebackers coach with the Bengals before he came back to ND. Went on to have like the last two seasons a top 10 defense, I mean, even like top 5 defense last year, given all the injuries, especially. Like just absolutely completely rehabbed his images, is now back in the NFL as a coordinator, like you said. And Chris Ash, like it remains to be seen what this hire will do for Notre Dame. He's not someone that's been in college football for a long time. Again, not a great reputation as a head coach, one of the worst Rutgers teams ever. Maybe that can be Notre Dame. Maybe if Marcus plays his cards right, like he'll be the guy who brings back all these defensive, maybe secret geniuses and turns them into stars somewhere else.
Which is like quietly, I mean, and not even quietly, what Brian Kelly was really good at. Like south of Nick Saban, there weren't many coaches in college football that absorbed the constant turnover in their coordinators the way Brian Kelly did. And you look at, what eventually became a bunch of future head coaches and Clark Lee, Mike Elko, who all came through South Bend and were able to do what they do. Marcus Freeman, the last of them, as he took the
Yeah.
baton from Brian here. Like that was an area where Notre Dame really excelled, was keeping that through line and giving these guys the opportunity. The biggest thing Chris Ash and Al Golden had in common, and this is sure like the smallest sample size anecdotally, but whenever I see that, like I always want to hear what guys who played for these guys said. And I
Mhm.
hit up players that played for, Al Golden back in the day, guys that played for, a couple, like I should say a couple, like one or two that played for each of these guys back in the day. And both had a lot of very favorable things to say that sounded like a good through line. Like, whatever happens, head coaching's a different animal. Coordinator and what you can do in that role is the thing I care far more about. And both these guys seem to come with, at least some positive things said about them from guys that I talked to who did lace them up for them. So gives me some hope for all of them there. That hope bolstered, Jess, by the fact we talked a little bit about recruiting right now. A really hot summer for Notre Dame in the class of 2026. Right now, the 24/7 composite rankings have Notre Dame at fourth behind USC, Georgia, and Texas A&M. And for an offseason where Notre Dame lost, Chad Bowen, who was their recruiting coordinator and someone credited with a lot of their success, and replaced him with Mike Martin, a GM that they brought from the NFL level with the Lions. Really fun to see, Jess, all of this starting to come together as Notre Dame, to their credit, has leaned into playing the game, it appears, and operating in the structure of modern college football in a way that, frankly, I wasn't sure they were going to be willing to, given the university's history.
Yeah, it's not something that I wanna take for granted either because there was a long period of time there where it's like, yes, Notre Dame is a serious football program, but they're never going to do X, Y, and Z things that Alabama's going to do, Georgia's gonna do, Ohio State's gonna do, and, you know, last season, I think, like you said, as we've said many times, it just shows that maybe that they're a lot closer than we thought. And going on this recruiting run now after losing a national championship game, but winning all of those that 13 or 12 game win streak is really really incredible and I think a testament to Marcus Freeman and the staff, but also doing it after a season where Notre Dame, week two, laughing stock of college football, lost as a 28-point favorite at home. Um, I don't want to take that for granted either. That emotionally we've all rebounded from last year's week two debacle. So hopefully there won't be one of those this season. I guess remains to be seen. In other Notre Dame news, Mike, Elijah Golden, he postponed
Yeah.
his announcement. He's someone that Notre Dame was feeling pretty good about, so we'll keep an eye on that. In the women's basketball world, Neil Ivy won a gold medal as an assistant coach for the U19 USA team. So congrats to her. I saw Hannah Hidalgo signed an NIL deal with Unrivaled this past weekend as college basketball ambassador. I'm not sure what that means, but I love the Unrivaled League. Tons of Notre Dame alums played in Unrivaled last season, the 3-on-3 league based out of Miami that a couple of Huskies started, but it was a good idea. So I'll
Yeah.
give Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier credit for it. But Sonia Citron, Mike, 3-point contest. She finished last, but she's a
Yeah.
rookie and she did a really good job and she was nervous and I loved watching it. So shout out to her and Skylar Diggins and K-Back and Jackie Young, all the WNBA All-Stars.
I've been pumped for Sonia, who was definitely third in the pecking order on Notre Dame's team last year in terms of who talked about her publicly. Like, Olivia Miles, Hannah Hidalgo were always going to be the first names out of anyone's mouth. But in the back half of the season, everyone, especially the WNBA scouts, were all like, hey, you guys know Sonia Citron's incredible on both ends of the court and exactly what the W looks for. And lo and behold, she was at All-Star Weekend as a rookie participating in all this. Like, it's been an incredible run for her in Washington in that regard. So happy to see her getting her moment in the sun after last year, maybe not always getting the attention she probably deserved through her play.
Absolutely. And dating Maris Leafau. So, there's always a football connection
Yeah.
on this show. Mike, is there anything we forgot? I mean, it's our first episode. So, I mean, tell your friends, listen, subscribe, like, rate, review. Everyone has like an annoying Notre Dame fan that they know. If that's not person's not you, which if you've gotten this far, it's probably you. But send it to that person and make it them send it to their annoying Notre Dame friend.
Yes, pass it around your network of friends who incessantly remind you at parties that they went to Notre Dame and lead that off by telling you class and what dorm they were a part of while they
Mm.
were on campus. Jess, in terms of things that we forgot, it wouldn't be a first episode if we didn't get way out too far in front of this and give a season prediction based
Ooh,
on the
okay.
win total. So we had 10.5 as the win total that we mentioned off the top of the show. We have given all this information in the meantime. So if I had to ask you right now, as we sit here in the end of July, Notre Dame over or under 10.5 wins and a playoff appearance, which way are you going?
You're basically asking, can Notre Dame either split the first two games or will they lose a dumb game? This is what you're asking
Yes,
me.
exactly.
It's such a good line because like my soul is like 10, but I don't want to be a pessimist, so I'll take the over.
Jess, I am usually like you. You and I are usually aligned in a lot of ways, and I'm usually always the one that has to be talked into people buying into the high end expectations of Notre Dame. Last year, and the result from Marcus Freeman and that group, and the way it happened, the way they went about winning last year, made me more confident than I have been in a long time that Notre Dame is capable of winning a national championship in my lifetime again. I had been such a pessimist on that front, and last year really changed something in me. And based on the amount of defensive talent, especially they have coming back, that group of the O-line plus the running backs, to me, give this team a really high floor. So I'll say over on this, and they should absolutely be a team in the mix for the expanded playoff again and should be pushing for a really high seed. In my mind, the quarterback's going to go a long way in deciding that. We'll find out a lot about it, but I think they've built a really nice infrastructure around whoever is going to be throwing passes in South Bend. So let us know your guys' prediction for that at the Echoes ND Pod. In addition to subscribing to all those great places that Jess mentioned, we'll be with you guys every Tuesday from here on out. Jess, thanks so much. Go Irish.
Go Irish.